Well, I promised you another reading from my forthcoming novel, The Life and Extraordinary Times of Evelyn Pennywhistle. And as with the wonderful cave from my first reading, where better than the site of a Roman copper mine here on the island of Cyprus. As I explained before, Evelyn is a young lady growing up in the late 1940s, suffers unspeakable cruelty at the hands of her wholly inadequate parents. But Evelyn grows to become a fine journalist and an award-winning novelist in her own right. So we'll pick up where we left off. Evelyn's poorly patched school skirt and blouse singled her out for ridicule and torment from morning till noon, when the school bell would ring and she would run home in floods of tears, unaware in her innocence that the hardship she cruelly endured from both her parents and her peers would eventually shape her life in its entirety. There was, however, brief respite from such hellish suffering during the end-of-term holidays, when Evelyn would be taken by her disgruntled father to the train station and packed off to her grandmother's cottage in the Yorkshire Dales with little more than a farthing and a strawberry jam sandwich to sustain her. A shower of steam would engulf her father, who barely acknowledged his daughter in parting, but Evelyn waved back all the same, hoping, it seemed, for a glimmer of parental affection. But when the steam subsided, her father was gone, and the screeching locomotive wheels gripped the rails in readiness to ferry her far, far away. Evelyn leaned enthusiastically from the window, waving with a broad smile to the dairy cows, the sheep and the wallowing pigs. Her face soon blackened with coke smoke. "Hello, hello," she'd call to the grazing creatures, each of them turning in her direction. Good day to you," she added with a curtsy in parting. Once inside the many tunnels en route to the Dales, the sound of the mighty locomotive would be amplified, affording the young girl an opportunity to scream unheard into the blackness, a chance to air her frustrations at the miserable hand she had been dealt. Gripping the carriage door with whitened knuckles, whilst tears tracked across her grubby cheeks, Evelyn, in a compartment of her own, unleashed the fire that had been smouldering within her, her veins protruding from her slender neck in doing so. This burgeoning rage, whilst directed at the passing tunnel wall, was of course intended for her wholly inadequate parents and those incessant tormentors at St Winifred's School for Boys and Girls. Emerging from the tunnel moments later, Evelyn's mood would eventually lighten with the warmth of the sun on her face, and she'd drop into a seat to dry her eyes on her cardigan sleeves. She was free, for the time being at least. Agnes, her widowed grandmother, stood each and every summer waving her handkerchief on the platform as a whistling steam train approached. "Granny!" Evelyn called, time and time again from the window, her heart fit to burst for her one true love. "Granny, I'm back!" "That you are, my darling," Agnes chuckled, whenever her beloved granddaughter leapt into her open arms. "That you are." With a lick of her scented handkerchief, Agnes tenderly wiped the coke smoke from Evelyn's cheeks. "Look at you, my girl," she laughed once more. "You look like a chimney sweep's boy." Evelyn handed her grandmother the pitiful pillowcase her parents had packed, containing a single change of unwashed clothes and a powdered egg pot of pebbles. She then skipped alongside her grandmother towards her trusty horse and cart waiting outside the station. "Mr. Bartholomew!" she'd shriek with sheer delight, breaking free from her grandmother to race to the aged nag with her pigtails once again bobbing behind her. "Oh, Mr. Bartholomew, I've missed you," she'd add, embracing the piebald horse, who stooped to rest its head on her shoulder. Evelyn closed her eyes and wrapped her arms tightly around the animal's neck and breathed an extended sigh of contentment and, of course, relief. To say the time spent amid the rolling Yorkshire Dales was a blessed release for the young Evelyn would be an understatement for sure. Agnes's rose-covered cottage would inspire the carefree child, with its wondrous garden positively brimming with buttercups, bluebells, snapdragons and dreamy spires of towering hollyhocks and delphiniums. She would lie on a lace tablecloth in the middle of the lawn, stringing daisies together, whilst conjuring images amongst the candy-floss clouds that drifted lazily by. "Here, Granny," she'd say, draping a floral garland around her grandmother's neck while she sat rocking and knitting a new cardigan for the grinning girl, a cardigan she would cherish and wear religiously until her very next visit. Willow Tree Cottage, aptly named after the magnificent weeping willow which hung over the shallow stream at the bottom of the garden, truly captivated Evelyn. She would swing from bank to bank on the rope attached to the broadest bough, shrieking with sheer delight and kicking up her heels. But it was her grandmother's library of some 400 or so hardback books that enchanted the young girl the most. Agnes would sit and read to Evelyn beside a roaring log fire long into the night, until eventually an unbridled passion for the written word bewitched her and a lifelong love of literature was born. At an early age, Evelyn was reading such weighty tomes as Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, Dickens's Great Expectations, and a particular favourite of hers, Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, a novel long since lauded as one of the finest works of literature of all time. This tale of a young woman's struggle against prejudice and poverty and her eventual rise to freedom and financial independence struck a personal chord with the bright young Evelyn Pennywhistle. Her love and respect for such noteworthy scribes spawned an addiction, firstly for journaling and eventually to works of fiction of her own, albeit crudely penned prose, brief monologues and poetic pieces designed to distract her from her own harsh reality. Mr. Bartholomew featured heavily in her early works, often carrying her off on his broad back to darkest Africa perhaps, or the fabulous falls of Niagara, where adventure and daring endeavour would await her. Agnes, of course, was filled with nothing but pride for the budding young author, heaping praise and encouragement upon her at every opportunity. Her parents, however, frowned upon her creative achievements, going so far as to burn an early manuscript of hers, along with the kindling and coal. Heartbroken but resolutely determined, Evelyn sat up night after night, huddled beside a dimly lit oil lamp in the corner of her modest room. Her grasp of the written word would soon catch the eye of the sisters and the principal at St. Winifred's, earning her a merit and a star on several occasions. Whilst brimming with pride, though, her academic superiority over her peers only sought to fuel their angst against her. But her skin had thickened by now, and the small-minded mockery did very little to dent the hardened exterior she had built about herself. Writing, it seemed, was her superpower, a gift that elevated her above those petulant peers, and her parents too for that matter, for the first time in her pitiful life. Neither her mother nor her father had excelled educationally, and had therefore been the architects of their own impoverished existence. Evelyn, however, vowed to differ and orchestrate her own rise, like that of Miss Jane Eyre, to a position of prominent social standing. She took a Saturday job at the corner shop, sweeping floors, stacking the shelves, and polishing the glass jars of sugared mice, cough candy, humbugs, and hard gums. Evelyn also delivered the newspapers, huffing and puffing astride Mr. Mortar's antiquated delivery bicycle, gritting her teeth and digging deep on those punishing hills, but squealing and kicking up her heels once again when freewheeling down the opposite side, with her pigtails, of course, bobbing behind her. Evelyn earned a pittance for her time at the miserly Mr. Mortimer's convenience store, barely affording her a pot of ink for the fountain pen her grandmother had gifted her, and a ream of coarse white wrapping paper she painstakingly cut into workable page-sized pieces with which to pen her fanciful tales. Each and every crudely manufactured wrapping paper page was meticulously numbered at the bottom right-hand corner and slipped into a brown paper bag when a tale was complete. Her beloved manuscript was then stowed safely beneath her horsehair mattress along with the others. The prolific young author drew on her day-to-day observations, like the tale of the miserly Mortimer Mouse, for instance, a repugnant rodent consumed by greed who rode his bent and buckled bicycle about town with an air of contempt for his fellow mice whilst hoarding a mountain of cheese. Evelyn often giggled to herself while sweeping the corner shop floor, glancing over her shoulder as Mr. Mortimer greedily devoured his cheese and pickle sandwich behind the counter, without a thought nor care for his young employee. The cleverly descriptive similarities between the shopkeeper and the tight-fitted town mouse were uncanny, to say the least. But the loathsome rodent was soon forced with a stroke of Evelyn's fountain pen to plead for his miserable life, when his twitching tail was snapped and snared in a trap. His fellow mice laughed at his comeuppance and insisted the thrifty hoarder hand over his entire mounting of cheese in exchange for his freedom. Mortimer Mouse sat in floods of tears, nursing his crooked and crippled tail, whilst his stockpile of Stilton and his coveted collection of Camembert was nibbled and gnawed until the cupboards were bare. Along with Mortimer Mouse, Evelyn penned several delightful tales featuring the ginger tomcat that lived 3 doors down but came to visit her windowsill each and every night. Although the friendly feline's name was Bob, according to the tag on his tartan collar, in Evelyn's overactive imagination, however, Gingerbeard and his cutthroat pirates were the scourge of the higher seas, armed to the teeth with cutlasses and swigging rum aboard the tallest of tall ships, the Frisky Squid. Evelyn was now getting into a literary stride, so to speak, but the cruel hand of fate was about to deal her another disastrous card, when her father stayed too long at the Boar's Head one evening and staggered home after dark. Seeing the flicker of lamplight at Evelyn's window, he flew into a drunken rage and stormed up the stairs to snatch the lamp from her makeshift desk, cursing her wasteful extravagance and preaching the price of oil in exacerbated tone. Evelyn cowered in the corner, clutching several wrapping paper pages to her beating chest, pages that were torn from her grasp and hurled from the window to flutter down to the garden below, where the pitter-patter of approaching rain would soon obliterate them. Meanwhile, Evelyn's mother supped dry gin in an equally inebriated stupor in the kitchen below, whilst the storm raged overhead, both outside and within. Evelyn leapt onto her boxwood bed in order to shield her precious manuscripts, as the leather belt was slipped from her father's waistband. His frustrations and inadequacies were then taken out on the young girl's back, but no matter how searing the pain of each ferocious lash, Evelyn refused to cry out, nor be broken. Her father soon tired and stumbled out of the bedroom, wheezing with his trousers now sagging at half-mast. From that day forward, his daughter's steely defiance remained at the forefront of Evelyn's father's mind, and whilst bitterly resentful, he would never raise his hand against her again. It was he that had been broken that fateful stormy night, and the heavily marked Evelyn emerged bloodied but victorious. Well, I hope you like that second reading. There will be another forthcoming. It's getting rather blustery at the copper mine here, so I'm going to head off home for a cup of coffee. God bless you all.